Hello, welcome to this demo. We're going to talk about how all your policies belong to us and how basically we're going to use the CI/CD integration of Tetration to keep a single repository of all our policy, a single place, a single ring to rule them all in some extent. My name is Remy Philippe and I'm going to walk you through this and how we can get that done with Tetration. So let's start with a few slides. Number one, let's get you choose whatever you want to put there. Policy is never as easy as just 3 boxes on a diagram, despite what people tell you. It's a lot of things that go together at some point to get policy working, and obviously different people, different owners, different teams. And I'm going to kind of give you a spoiler on this one. Life is not as easy as it seems. And what happens? Well, real world is much closer to this. And I'm pretty sure you can add layers, more firewalls, more other services that are protecting application, many more things happening across your environment. Now, the problem with all that is obviously when you want to set a policy somewhere, well, ideally it works from end to end, right? I mean, if you can't get your policy to start from, say, the internet and go down to your workload and all the dependencies of your workload, so for example, the cloud in this example, well, you're kind of stuck. So what do I need to open for this to work? Well, quite a few points. You have to look at all the green boxes is where I have to do some kind of action. This action could be set up the DDoS prevention to actually protect the incoming traffic. It could be configure DC Edge, or it could be just configuring some kind of group somewhere else in the environment, so for example AWS, to access a service provided over there. So there's quite a bit of things we need to do. Now it's kind of a little problem because, I mean, if you're here looking at that, you probably have some kind of stake inside the container architectures. So what do you control? Well, just this, right? I mean, tiny piece of the puzzle. And so many other teams control so many different things across the environment that it doesn't seem realistic to think that you can actually go and enforce this policy easily across all this. Right, so I've been a little bit negative there. So let's take a second for a group therapy. Bang your head, don't crash your screen, and then we'll continue from there. Okay, done? Perfect. Let's talk about the solution at this point. There's a few things we can do to actually help there. And the logic comes around everything we already have today. I mean, we have things like source control, we have things like firewalls and things like that. They're all just there, they're available, and we just can't get them to work together. Well, that's something that we're actually changing with Tetration. And the idea is actually to go and make this work together much better in a simple workflow. And ta-da, here's the workflow. Developer actually comes in and just put a star developer because it could be anyone that just feels comfortable with Git. And if you don't feel comfortable with Git, just go to the web UI. So you take your policy, you go and you put it in the source control. And this policy just follows the network policy format of Kube. We didn't reinvent the wheel again. It's something simple, something you can actually use to this environment. So you're going to push it along with your code, and that's going to go in your build pipeline. This build pipeline is going to apply first a linter. Because, I mean, Uncle Ben would say that, let's say, with great power comes great responsibilities, right? So we need to know if what you're doing is actually fair and right across the environment. And if it is, well, the linter should work. But if it's not, the linter should fail. And we're going to see in the demo how we're actually going to use guardrails to protect the environment and use the linter to tell us if someone is going against those guardrails. That's super practical and super easy to use. Mr. Developer, you're happy with this environment? Awesome. You want to play with the rules? Perfect. Your policy will go straight and you will be happy. You don't want to play by the rules? You're going to have to ask exceptions. That will take time. And that will impact you at some point. So that gives a very nice story for different teams to be able to cooperate and to work faster together. Then if the linter actually succeeds, and obviously failure and success is dependent on your preference. It's just a return code. But if the success is there for the linter, then you can deploy your policy to the test environment. And you can just go and run your integration testing with the actual policies deployed in this environment. Super simple. Policies mimic the production. You see them there. You test with those policies. If you forgot something, because it just happens, well, you can just go back and you can go and get this policy and better understand what's going on behind it. Go and fix it, push your new code, etc., in a very iterative fashion. Once you're happy with all that, trigger the promotion of the builder to prod. You trigger this promotion, guess what? The test policy just flips from dev to prod. Policies goes there, and that's about it. And you don't need to care about enforcement points, because titration in this context will act as a policy plane. And it's going to go and configure or work with partners to make sure it can configure the whole environment. Cisco or not, it doesn't matter. Make sense? Simon, you like what you're hearing? Okay, let's see if it goes past like the marketing test. So I've set up an environment here. And my environment is basically a cluster with a set of applications. This application is custom built. It's just a bit of code. It's actually public on GitHub. So you can go there on Titrator, demo policy pipeline, and you will see here. I recommend you read the commit notes. There's lots of entertainment across that. So the goal of this application is super simple. It's to show you what you have access to. So if I go to my application here, I can see if I can access the dev, the prod, or if I can't access anything, like here. You can see I can't actually access anything. Why is that? Because when I actually push my policy here, you can see here my policy dev, I didn't set anything. See the comments everywhere? Actually, let me zoom in a little bit. Everything is commented out except the default deny. So I'm actually blocking everything in my environment. And how does that translate inside titration? Well, let's go and have a look. I can go to my policy. Here I have 0 absolute, 0 default, and everything is catch-all deny. Exactly as my policy states here. So it's kind of expected that this policy does not work here, right? And you want a spoiler? Remember I told you third parties, integration. The actual policy is even not enforced. Well, it's actually enforced in multiple places, but one place it's actually enforced is directly on the load balancer. So my F5 in this case is actually enforcing this policy for me. So I'm actually getting as close as possible to the users when I'm getting there. Pretty nice. One place, one policy, one configuration. So at this point, let's actually go and change our policy. We're going to go to VS Code and we're going to go and basically allow connections to maybe to the prod DB. Actually, to the dev DB, dev here. Then I'm going to allow connection to dev because, I mean, we're not very good. So prod, dev. I'm reversing the terms all the time. And I'm going to allow access to everyone, to my environment. Let's go here and let's open up this. So I've just saved my policy. So I have a policy that allows anyone to access, I'm talking French now, to access my service here. And I can allow my application here to talk to prod, my application to talk to dev, and my catch-all stays denied. Pretty simple. Let's commit. And obviously, I'm pushing to master, which you probably would not be doing, but at least it just gives you an idea of what's going on here. Now I've pushed my policy. That's the moment where my pipeline actually goes and takes control over this. So what's happening now behind the scene is obviously the classical stuff you would expect from a software build, which is actually running at this point. Here you go. And then once this build is complete, one of the steps of the build is actually to deploy the policies, which is the last step of the build. All right, so at this point, my pipeline has gone through and you can see that all the steps are green. Obviously, I sped up a bit the video here because I don't think you care to see all those steps playing out. And now if I go back to my policy, I got my policy here. Remember what did we say? Everyone to my app, the service here, and then port 80, and then the different stages here at this point. So now I basically push the policy, and this policy is actually getting enforced on the platform as we speak. So we can go and have a look at that. All right, looks like this policy is now enforced. I can see that I can access my database in dev, and I can access my application. So everything looks pretty good. Remember, we give access to everyone. So now if I go to my clients, I can see that I have access to about everything here, which is exactly what we're expecting. Perfect. So we've just set a policy through the CI/CD pipeline. Now again, remember Uncle Ben, with great power comes great responsibilities. Let's come and let's add some guardrails at this point, because you have the power to basically shoot yourself in the foot and probably everyone standing around you. Let's avoid that. So what I'm going to do is now I'm going to set a policy, an overarching policy, which is actually going to say that at this point, dev cannot talk to prod. So let's give it a shot here. So here I was in my app dev. I'm going to go to my ESX VSX3 Kube here, which is my Kubernetes cluster. And I'm going to create a new policy in which I'm going to deny with a lower priority development workloads to talk to production workloads. And I'm going to block all ports. Okay, and let's enforce this. Here we go, policy is enforced. Let's see if that made any difference here. All right, look at that. Now we have a policy which actually goes against the policy pushed inside the pipeline. But despite this, we still have the dev that works. Prod doesn't work. I'm in dev, I'm talking to dev. Kind of normal, everything works fine. My workload still works here. Perfect. And here. I just need to wait for that to come back. So at this point, we're pretty good. Now let's go and make things even more interesting. Let's actually go and integrate the campus. So let's create a policy that actually allows our RDS session to come in. And I'm going to remove the world policy here. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to allow my RDP session to work. But I'm also going to allow only my users of a very specific user group to access this application, which is going to be this group, which is 1109, right? So let's go and push our policy. Awesome, our policy has been pushed. Let's go and have a look at that. Okay, now I have two rules, one that says my IP address and one that says one LDAP specific group, which is 1109, which is there, which happens to have two workloads inside it. So now let's go and have a look if this has actually been enforced. Okay, so we're on RDS. Everything is working as expected. I can access the dev. I can't access the prod. Then I can go to my session, which is Tony at this point. Let's see. Looking good. Perfect. Timeout. That's expected. And now let's finally go and see our next user. All right, let's look at that. This policy seems to be enforced. I can see blocked on this workload. If I hit refresh, it doesn't work. I can go to my previous VDI session. I can still access the dev-db, not the prod. I can refresh, it actually works. And my RDS session, everything works in the same place. And let's look at enforcement. The beauty of this is that we actually combined enforcement from pieces coming in from the campus through ICE, things coming in through the AnyConnect client, things coming in through the F5 device. So we're actually merging enforcement across a whole bunch of platforms. And you can see my policy being rendered here on the F5 directly. But at the same time, I can actually go to my containers. And here are all my container policies, which has been rendered for me, talking to production workload at this point, for example, the drop that we created and so on. So hopefully that was interesting for you. We just went through quite a bit. We showed how we can use the policy in a single policy master inside Tetration to help and control the whole platform from a single place. Thank you for watching. If you're interested in knowing more, feel free to reach out to us or to go to cisco.com/go/Tetration.